бидејќи Андреја, колешката која што тоа одлично го правеше во моментот е зафатена со обврски во Словенија, со незините докторски студии, не знам дали замената ќе успее најдобро да се снајде, како и да е, вие што сте тука сте добре дојдени. Сега ќе морам да свртам на англиски. Okay, dear Mr. Pol Šetok, I introduce you into Macedonian language to our guests. There are around 38 at this moment, 38 participants. I introduce you a short bio of you, and I told them that you're former president of World Autism Organization and the father of son with autism spectrum disorder, and about your charity organizations in UK. And I forgot to mention, but I will mention now that we know each other since 2001, since Barcelona, where we also have together with Professor Karl Eichelt, which theory you are also in your research, you approve a lot of that peptides in the urine of the children with autism, caseomorphins, gluteomorphins. Also, we met each other in Krakow around 15 years ago, and around 5-6 years ago, 5 in Eindhoven, together with Paola Werkamp in Reattach Foundation. So I hope that we will enjoy in your presentation, and now I will turn off. You can share your presentation, and I will turn off my camera and the microphone. The floor is yours, and I'm honored as a president of Macedonian Scientific Society for Autism to have you on this webinar. Please put it on the full screen. Okay, the floor is yours, Paul.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me to speak. I'm highly honored to be doing this to such a group. There's a picture of me taken some years ago. It's the best one I've got of me, so I thought I would show that one. There is my son. The reason I'm here. My son Jamie was born in October 1970, and as you can see, he was a lovely looking baby. He was a very nice boy, but he was jaundiced when he was born, which soon went away after a few days, but we do wonder whether that was relevant. That was him when he was about 13 years of age. Again, he loved the countryside and walked great distances, and as you can see, he's a happy soul, but unfortunately things went wrong. This lady was the first person to mention, or it didn't use the word autism because it hadn't been invented yet, but she was the first one to write about it in 1925, which is 100 years ago. The first descriptions were there, but the word autism had not been used then, so it wasn't there. But she was the first record of it. And interestingly, in Denmark, at the same time, they had a school for people like Jamie who were autistic, but the word hadn't been classified totally then. But their school will celebrate 100 years of work next year, so it's been around for quite a long time. 100th anniversary there'll be celebrations next year, I'm sure. So although it's first described 100 years ago, but we still know very little about what causes it and what is best way to sort of treat it. Leo Kanner is often known as the father of autism because he was the first one to use the word and describe these children. At that time, the work was all done by psychologists and psychiatrists, and so that their views on what autism was governed by that. And he did say once parents just happened to defrost enough to produce a child. It was a joke, but it was, as people were saying. Asperger in 1940 produced material, but it was in German, so nobody read it until the 1970s. So there wasn't a lot of literature around describing these people. Bruno Bettelheim was from Austria, and he sort of muddied the water, rather, as far as we're concerned. He was a psychiatrist, and he wrote this book, The Empty Fortress, which appeared in 1967, and autism, the result of refrigerator parents. So it was my fault and the fault of my wife that our son was the way he was. And this wasn't well accepted by parents, but it was what the people in charge of the science were saying. And it was not until he died that they looked at his books and realized that it was all the science was fictional. And he hadn't cured 85 children with autism. And things moved on a bit since then. But throughout the 1970s, there were in the United States and the United Kingdom a few medical experts who still stuck to that story. And in continental Europe, these ideas still persist largely. It's the parents who are blamed, and it has caused at least 2 murders where the father has murdered the mother because they felt she was to blame for the autism. So when my son was diagnosed, it was these arguments were raging. Autism was the responsibility of psychiatrists and psychologists, and I'm not going to blame them for getting it wrong because they were not experts on any other things. Just their niche was psychology, and so they thought of everything in those terms. Until other people were brought in, that was the explanation. Treatment was autism was a behavioral disorder as far as they were concerned, and they had to do something to change the behavior. We now know that what they did was unkind, was cruel, and some of the things are banned now, and some still go on quietly. The hero of our story is Bernard Rimland. He was a psychologist who worked out of, I can't remember the name of the place now, in California. Anyway, he was in the Navy and a psychologist there, and his son turned out to be autistic, and he would not accept the arguments which people have been making to about what autism really was. He realized that there were other things going on. And in 1964, which was 61 years ago now, he published this book, this book here described here, and that put a much more biochemical and medical explanation to what was going on. They didn't know very much, but they knew that it wasn't as they had been described, just all in the mind, as it were. And there's Bernard Rimland, who, as far as I'm concerned, was the father of autism. He was a psychologist, and he was one of the founders of the Autism Society of America, and he started the studies as we see them now. He was prone to saying things like this: the medical establishment has been the enemy of people with autism since day one. He wasn't seeking friends, but I heard him say that, but that was his attitude. And on reflection, I think he's got a point. There are still barriers formed within the medical services which have not helped us in devising appropriate ways to treat people with autism. And I mentioned Steve Edelson as well. He was a young boy at the time who worked with just been talking. I'm afraid I've got this memory thing which I'm gradually losing. My memory with Bernie Rimland. He was a young student when he did, and he's still there, and he's now in charge of the unit because Bernie died a few years ago. And I want to congratulate him for keeping the whole thing going and increasing the work of the unit. And I'm very grateful to him and Bernie for what they did. In England, Dr. Lorna Wing, she was a psychiatrist, and so was her husband. And so I think they resented the fact that the parents were being blamed for their children, and they initiated the first sort of studies in the English language, which were based on what we actually saw. As a parent, I was pointed in the direction of Lorna Wing's book, and as soon as I read that book, I thought she is right. That is what's doing autism. It's a totally different disorder to what the other people have been saying. So she was a hero in my mind too for that. Her book made total sense. And now another of my hero friends, Carl Reichelt. As you can see, he's from Norway, and he was very important to us. He probably started the move of actually listening to parents to see what they said. It was they who suggested taking away gluten, the protein from wheat, and casein from milk, because they could be involved, and he didn't believe a word of it when he was told, but then he tried it, and it did make a difference in many cases, and we'll come back to that later. But I just want to mention him amongst my heroes. I did not, when I first read Max Planck's comments from 1902, a new scientific truth doesn't triumph by convincing its opponents. Whatever experiments you do, they will not change their mind, and you have to wait for the older people to die and younger people who do understand what's being said taking over. Now, there is some truth in that. It's not totally true, but it is the way things have been moving. Physicians, it is difficult for them to change their mind. Book writers, it's difficult for them to say, oh, we were wrong. Those stupid parents were right all the time. One of the things that we did notice was that we were getting more people with autism. This paper was the first one we put out on the subject in 2001, which is 25 years ago, when we noticed this increase in autism. And what is causing the problems? We don't know. We had to look around to see what was involved and what wasn't, and we're still doing it now. And I think we may have an answer for you on that one. Now, this is a lesson in what not to do. I saw this lovely slide which they produced in the CDC, which shows the numbers of people with autism over the years. And you see very little here and then gradually shooting up like that. And I thought I would be clever by just taking a photograph of the slide in the lecture I attended. And you get the drift of it, that you get a lot on there. But it does show dramatic increases in the numbers of people being diagnosed with autism of some sort. In our city, I live in the city of Sunderland, and last year there was a lot of material in the local paper about the numbers of people waiting to be diagnosed. There were huge numbers. At that time, there were 1,000 people, mainly children, waiting to be diagnosed. And this is when we sort of picked up on it to some extent. At the end of 2022, in the whole of the United Kingdom, there are estimated 140,000 such children, and mainly children, waiting to be diagnosed. A lot of adults as well. But by a year later, it was up to 185,000 people, mainly children, waiting for a diagnosis. And it's still the same. I cannot tell you what the figure is for this year because nobody has counted. But it must be well over 2,000 people waiting to be diagnosed. It's a scandal, but it was one that there was no warning for. But these numbers are our ones. There's my city, Sunderland, and they were keeping a record of the number of people coming to be diagnosed. And in 2021, 1 month there'd be 50. By the next year, there were 65, just waiting to be, new people waiting to be diagnosed. And then in 2023, it was up to 120, I think that says, 120 new ones. So there's all this, there are huge numbers waiting to be diagnosed locally, and there's an emergency program on way they're using. Interestingly, when Jamie was diagnosed in 1974, the average age of diagnosis was between 4 to 6 years. And as numbers went up, more people became used to diagnosis, and it dropped as children were being diagnosed much earlier. And by 2023, people weren't being diagnosed till they were 8. 8 years of age was the average for diagnosis. That is too late to get in on time when you can expect great changes. But that's the current situation. I don't know what it is now, but people are trying, and we've got to try harder to do this. Now, this is not just happening here, it's happening around the world. But are children with autism the same all over the world? I'm going to question that. We think they're all like the ones in England. We do anyway. And we picked up doing studies on them a long time ago. And many years ago, I was asked to go to Bahrain to do a talk about autism because they felt they knew nothing there. In fact, they were doing some very, very good work there. And one of the things I noticed was that the children weren't the same as the children in Sunderland. Our children in Sunderland, if they were 5 or 6 years old, they'd still be very nervous, very shy. But these children, the mother would say, go and say hello to Mr. Shettok. And they'd come over and sit on my lap and be friendly. And I thought that's strange. And although I've said 10 of 22 showed no signs until 22 months, it was actually most of them, nearly all of them. But that was when I started counting, when we were going through them. Now, in fact, these children were very different. I didn't think to ask what age you first saw symptoms until halfway through going through the list. And mainly they were saying at 24 months. They were diagnosed at 24 months. And the reason was that the Quran says you should continue breastfeeding. You stop breastfeeding when the child reaches 24 months. And in some of the countries around there, it is the law that you must stop breastfeeding at 24 months. But people do it till then. That's not what happens in America. It's not what happens in England. There's not so many doing breastfeeding. My son wasn't breastfed. He was too slow, and my wife, it hurt her, so didn't do it. But if in these countries they are supposed to do it, they don't know they're supposed to do it, but that's what the law says anyway. So that was an embarrassment for me. I just didn't know they were different. Now, another occasion, I was in Sicily, and in Sicily, I had taken urine samples from a lot of the children in this particular town on Sicily. I had about 13 children that we'd had urine samples from and looked at, and I made specifications about what the child would be like. I never did it before, and I will never do it again. I was being big-headed and showing off. That was the idea, but it was a disaster. I got 12 out of 13 wrong doing it. It wasn't the same. The children there were not the same at all. And when I got outside, there is Mount Etna, the biggest volcano in Europe, and it's virtually always got smoke coming out the top, and it's sort of very active. And what there is coming out is mercury vapor. And because it's so hot, it is vapor. It's not even liquid, it's vapor, and it's all over the place. And these children were different to what I've been seeing. And I mentioned this to Carl Reichelt, the Norwegian chap that I've been talking about. And he said, I get exactly the same thing. He said, in Northern Europe, Northern Italy, I'm fine. But when you're in the south, where all the volcanoes are, there's mercury in there making a big difference. And so I'm stressing that we've got to relate to the environment where these children live for differences. They're not the same all over the world. There are differences, naturally. Now we start a bit of chemistry. We picked on this at the start. We knew nothing about what goes on in people with autism, and we looked at what things do happen inside people, the biomedicine, biochemistry inside there, and we realized that there's a lot of movement and importance to this one amino acid, tryptophan. Lots of things start here and go off to other places. Now, tryptophan, it was noted that this goes down, some of it goes from this path, tryptophan, and then food produces melatonin, bufotenin, and mostly, which is covered up there, serotonin. Very important. Yeah. So people noted that people with autism are low on tryptophan, they're low on serotonin all the time. Melatonin doesn't peak at the same time of the day as it does with other people. And that's the one which controls the sleep as well. But that's only about 8% of the tryptophan goes along this pathway. But that's the one that people concentrated on. When you look at what else happens, there's a lot more goes through the kynurenine pathway. And these are very important. I'll mention in a minute. Indole isn't so important, but some of it goes there. But this route, we treat it as a sort of dustbin, the sort of draining away all the useless stuff, but far from it. A lot of the product goes there and just comes out in the urine. And what we found was huge quantities of this stuff. IAG, indole acrylyl glycine, in the urine of people with autism compared to other people. I was in France doing a talk about this. Now, I'm not a great chemist. I try, but one of the men in the audience stopped me and said, indole acrylic acid, that's impossible. I said, well, it's not. That's what the books say. It goes to that and it goes like that. And he said, but that it's used in membranes. It's very, it's a flat, very active molecule, and it would get involved in membranes, and all the membranes would sort of be useless after that. And I think that is a fact. But the body gets rid of it as quickly as it can as indole acrylyl glycine in that way. Now, forget about this bit for just now, but a lot of it, so tryptophan, the route I was talking about was this one, going along here. The kynurenine one is very important in disease control and immune systems working or not working. This route takes a lot more of the material, and it produces kynuric acid, for example, which protects you from epilepsy, whereas quinolinic acid kills cells and causes epilepsy. Sort of balances that sort of ratio thing. And many other things. You see nicotinamide is manufactured down here. So, and this is a I forgot what we call them now, but it moves products move around, energy products move around the system attached to that. So it's very important things though. But as I say, what we're seeing is this other compound. This is, at the time we were using chromatography and then coming out on a screen to see what's there. And this was a person with no symptoms at all, just looking at the urine, and there's not much there. There's lots of small things in the urine, a bit of stuff there, but not a lot. So that's the normal system. Now, we did many of these charts, and we gradually realized what they were telling us from different people. And unfortunately, when we were thrown out of the university, we had to destroy all our records. And we had 16,000 people that we'd looked at the urine from then and had other information from. But the law had changed and we had to get rid of it. So I only got one or two, which we quite honestly accidentally kept. We'd made slides of them and got those. So I cannot show you all the other things that we saw. But that was a typical non-ill person. This one is a typical person with autism. You'll see there's more stuff coming through into the urine because of leakiness, and there's this stuff. We didn't know what it was. All we got was this peak in the people with autism and not in the people without autism. Or it wasn't 100% there, but it was about 75% of the people with autism had this big peak. If you looked at it with a different color light, it was all these things didn't show at all, and it was that. It was blatantly obvious that these children and adults had this stuff in there. We also found it in Gulf War veterans. Something similar was going on there. We think the organophosphate pesticides that they were having to take were relevant. So here's this one again. I just want to say that organophosphates inhibit a number of these reactions that are going on here. It doesn't, we thought it would be blocking this and that's why it wasn't going there, but it wasn't. It blocks something here, which then blocks something here, but it will slow down the metabolism there. But this is where it was all going, into this product here, which we knew very little about. We didn't know what it was to start off with. It took us a year to find out what it was. We didn't have the equipment for doing that, but that is what it is, indole acrylyl glycine. Now, this is just to show you that the compounds here, tryptophan is a very important peptide, and there are two others that have got aromatic rings attached to them, just these three, phenylalanine, tyrosine, and tryptophan. And these are limited in their appearance in people with autism, all of these three, which means that you're going to be short of dopamine, which you desperately need in some pathways, melatonin. The other one I mentioned before, I can't remember what it was now, but you're going to be short of those because there's not as enough going down there as it should be going down there. Now this one, you better forget this after I've told you what it is. This one, it was actually a person with autism there, but it didn't have that stuff. Didn't have the IAG, the others have got, just in smallish amounts. And then a little bit of other things here. Now, this one did give us problems. One of the girls working in our department, I call her a girl, but she was by far the smartest person in our department. She had a PhD from Cambridge University, but wanted to work helping children. So she came and worked with us for nothing. And she came in one evening, well, 5 o'clock, and said, have you noticed all the ones with these funny charts are the ones where the parents say that the vaccine caused autism? And I said, no, I haven't noticed it. But I looked then, that evening I stayed in and I looked at the ones, and she was right. The ones where the parents said the vaccine had caused it were different to the others. They had another compound in there which other people didn't have. Now I decided to contact. I didn't go to the newspapers. I didn't go telling drug companies, but I did contact the Department of Health in London, saying, look, we've got something here to show you. We didn't shout about it because it was still very contentious at the time. And I said, could I come down and explain it to you? And they said, no, you can't. You can send your results. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that because it wasn't designed for this purpose. It was just we've noticed it. And they said, no, you send it to us or we don't look at it, which I thought was wrong. I wrote a rude letter and then I regretted it, but never mind. But it now, no, the other thing was that in America, loads more people were claiming that the vaccine was responsible. In England, we did tests on it 3 times and got the same result. Between 6 and 7% of the people with autism, the parents said vaccines did it. But in America, it'd be at least half the people with autism. They said the vaccine was responsible. They said it was that, and I couldn't make sense of that. But then I think about why would American children be more likely to have autism from vaccine than English children? It was steady. We did 3 times with 1,000 people each time, and it was 6.5 to 7% each time. But in America, nobody's done it, but it was half the children, I would suggest. Well, you have to look at the way they did vaccines in America. In England, you make an appointment, you go, and they give you your MMR jab, and you go home and do whatever you're going to do. In America, the child was usually unwell and had gone to the doctor to see the doctor, and he should not have been vaccinated when he's unwell. Also, the American children had been vaccinated with about a dozen other vaccines before they got to this one. So they'd had lots of, I've forgotten the stuff again now, sorry. Mercury, because that's in vaccines, and aluminium, which is in vaccines to help them work. They had a lot of that stuff. And also they gave them a pain-killing tablet at the same time, which is not a good idea, really. Paracetamol or acetaminophen or whatever they call it, has a lot of strange reactions. But I think that was probably the difference now, why they got so many and we got so few, comparatively few. Anyway, we get none now. We don't find anybody with autism who's got this sort of compound here that I was talking, that one there that I'm talking about. And we get samples from America, and we get samples from England, and they're not there. I do not believe that the MMR today is causing problems, but I do think historically it was. I'm not going to go around shouting that, but I think there's going to be a lot more notice taken about these things in the next year or so. Just the way you can show it on a graph. Controls had some IAG, everybody had some IAG in it, but typical autism, it was up there, and regressive autism, the ones where the children, there's a vaccine that did it, they didn't have much IAG either, but they had lots and lots of peptide-like substances, which I call peptoids, there. Differences. And the one other thing, which is, as you're all experts, I will point out at this time, one thing we did find is that a lot of the children with autism had very low levels of creatinine. So when we were measuring the things against creatinine, the figures all came out very high. We use creatinine because we have to, but we also use specific gravity of the as a sort of count for how much creatinine, for how much, what you measure it all up against anyway. Sorry about that. I worked in a school of pharmacy. We don't have customers, we're not doctors, but people would ask us what we gave, what we suggested. So we suggested trying different things one after the other. First thing we tried was milk, because that's what we were most noted for, the work we did with gluten and casein. The milk, and if it works, you're going to see it within 3 weeks. Taking milk away, you will see that it's and then you might move on and do gluten too. We wanted to know what was working and what wasn't working. So we had this sort of panel drawn out so you can see what is working and what it isn't. And it was quite clear that some people this was helpful, and in about half of them, it was worth doing. And the other half, it wasn't worth doing, not worth doing. They're different. We're not just dealing with one disorder or one problem. There are different things in the environment which are causing these disorders. So we've been conscious for a long time that this is not just a single compound that we're dealing with. At this time as well, there was a lot of interest in genes, and people were spending about 80% of the money spent on autism research was looking for the gene, the autism gene. But I thought you might be interested in this paper, which came out towards the end of that period of time. As a world record number of people authoring this thing, I counted maybe 137 authors in this thing. And these are all people agreeing to a statement about it, what they had been finding and so on. Eric von Bohm and others, I know a lot of them, but some of them I don't know. But they put out this statement that said, based on results, well, you can see it there, based on results from individual SNPs and their en masse effect on risk, as inferred from it's reasonable to conclude that common variants do affect the autism spectrum disorder, but their individual effects are modest. That's close to being non-existent. And then they said the same thing again in more complex words, just saying, yes, they accept that there is some effect from genes, but it's not the beat. There's something else. There are other things which are doing it. We, at the same time, have been doing the same thing, looking for the marker. There isn't the marker for autism biologically either. There are things which can be helpful with identifying it, which I'll show you more in a moment. But it creates a lot of problem. People can look at the same results and come up with different conclusions. In this case, it was a football match. And this side of the road is filled with Newcastle supporters. They're the villains. And the Sunderland supporters are at this end. And it looks as if they're waving to each other. But it was rather more violent than that, as you can see, with the police and looks like fire up that end. But people do take it very seriously. And there's a sort of dispute about these things. And people take sides in it, as in this case. Now, this was an interesting situation. A student came into our laboratory one day and said, "Can I help?" And we said, "Yeah," and he was a psychologist, but he couldn't do the work we were doing. But we said, what we'd like to know is whether people live in cities or in rural areas that are having autism. And he was big, he was bad, and his name was Bob Budd. So big bad Bob Budd, he had a big map of United Kingdom on the wall, and every time we got people with autism, he would mark them on there, so we could see where they came from and what the countryside was like there. And we got a shock when the results came out, because there were far more autism in rural areas than in urban areas. We expected the smoke and things like that in the cities would be causing autism. It's not. It's things in the countryside which are doing it, which fitted with our ideas about weed killers and insecticides in particular. In fact, we wrote our first article on that. There's this magazine which parents made to sell it in shops, and I was in there, this one, in 2007, and we were explaining how organophosphate insecticides caused autism and what was going on, what you saw. We got to stop this, but nobody took any notice. If we were from Cambridge or London, people would listen to us. But when you're from Sunderland, it doesn't work like that. But our results were quite good. But it wasn't until 2019, I think this is, and the British Medical Journal published a paper saying pesticides and autism, new evidence. So that was quite a long time after we published our material without much data, but they did it, and I'd have thought this sort of opened people's eyes to what's there. It was a good paper, and it produced the data, and it was game, set, and match, as far as I'm concerned, to these things, these products causing autism, and other things which they were also used. We were having problems with sheep and cows. The law said they had to be dipped in these disinfectants twice a year to kill all the insects and things like that in them. And in fact, these got very concentrated in materials, and they just, when they'd finished, they just poured it over the fields. And another unfortunate thing is I used to go and help them do the sheep dipping, etc. All the men I went sheep dipping with are dead now. I'm not saying what happened, but they didn't survive. Organophosphate pesticides are vicious, and people have been writing about it and autism, how they affect transmission between different cells. They block the cells so it doesn't go. In fact, if you look at some of these papers, look at that. 1995, they worked it out that these pesticides are going to affect transmission in the brain. And there's lots of papers to them. Many of them had Margaret Bauman's name in it. She was a mother of people with autism. But there's all sorts of things which are doing it. No notice taken. Then this is the writing that went with that paper in the medical journal. Conclusions. They found that people living within 2,000 meters of, and they were pregnant there, and they looked at people who, when these were fields which had been sprayed with organophosphate pesticides, and there's a lot more autism in those fields than there were in the fields where all these pesticides had not been used. Surely people can see what's going on here, what's causing these problems. Exposing, and there's more stuff. There's a little bit more stuff, but they didn't stop using them, and dangerously. Right, I'm going to go on a little bit longer. Sorry, but the worst of these things which we rumbled is one called glyphosate, and I looked to see how many deaths, how much was spread on the land for a period of time. Then it sort of stayed the same. I thought, well, it can't be that, until I realised that what they were doing here. This is a list of the number of acres of ground which are covered in this way, but this is just put into stored products and putting these very powerful weed killers. They were. This was now. It all started with a lady. Stephanie Sennett, and I've got her book here, and she wrote this splendid book about it, showing all the research that's been done on it. And in my mind, there's no doubt whatsoever that this is what's causing the problems. And there's a movement to get them removed. The European Union did, and then you'll see what happened. But this is what happened. That plants have a mechanism which we animals lack. It's called the shikimate system, and so they produce all these things going. This is the route it takes, and it produces tyrosine, phenylalanine, and tryptophan, the three aromatic peptides which are necessary for animal life. Now, we can't produce them. None of these enzymes appear in animals. We can't make them. So what happens is that it gets down to here and is blocked. And if you put glyphosate on the plant, it's a weed killer, it blocks this and the plant dies. So that's what's happening. We get our tryptophan, our tyrosine, or phenylalanine from plants. Plants are not all big things. Where do we get these materials, vital materials from? We get from friends who occupy our body in the microbiome. Bacteria, some bacteria are sort of very plant-like in their actions, and they produce this stuff. They produce these products that we need, the tryptophan, etc. They make it, and we just absorb it from them and use it as the plants do. But if you've got that stuff, you put it on and it kills weeds. It is selective in the reactions. Well, I'm getting mixed up now. but it just stops some reactions. It blocks this reaction so that it doesn't go down there. But the rest of the weed the rest of the plant is okay, but the weeds die. But what they did, the Monsanto, famous for making toxic substances, they found the genes from other plants and put them into the plant they were dealing with that time. That time it was soya they were doing, and they put genes from other plants to soya and into their product, and the plant could live, but all other weeds died. I haven't explained that very well, but if you think about it, you'll work it out. So Monsanto developed this stuff, glyphosate. They introduced a gene to soya plants which makes them immune to glyphosate, and so it could still produce tryptophan, and the crop would survive. All other plants would be killed, and included all these. And if we get it in our bodies, it does exactly the same thing. Kills these roots, so you don't get the peptides that we need are not there. So we've got a problem. Good bacteria, such as lactobacillus, they make it. They make the stuff. Bad bacteria like Clostridia, they kill these and eat them, as it were, and does lots of other things in the body. Does this glyphosate? It is nasty stuff. So autism existed before glyphosate existed. We have to accept that. So where else can autism come from? Well, we're looking for something which is going to kill the bacteria that we need to produce those things. Penicillins are mildly like it, but the cephalosporin type this is a word I keep forgetting. Antibiotics. Yeah, if antibiotics will kill the bacteria that we need. That's what they're there for. And there's experiments going on now, and in fact they do. They kill the thing. So again, it's this factor taking place. Glyphosate was originally developed as an antibiotic, but it's a bit too strong for use, and the cephalosporins are strong as well, and we should be very careful with them. I haven't mentioned sulfation at all. The sulfation is wrong in people with autism. The mechanisms don't work well, and some people in our list things were taking sulfate in their recipes. But you didn't drink it for obvious reasons. You have diarrhea for it. But it does work if you put it in the bath water, and it's absorbed through the skin, and it helps. A lot of reactions work much faster if you've got sulfate on the end of the molecule. It goes faster than just a simple molecule. So, but a lot of reactions don't work properly if you haven't got enough sulfate, and you can be short of sulfate. Some diseases can trigger infection. You don't need anything else. And the only one I bothered to mention is rubella, which may ring bells when you think about MMR, what the R is. But I'll say no more about that one at the moment. Valproate, an anti-epilepsy drug, which is used, and if it's taken by the mother during pregnancy, or even while she's giving milk to her children, this could happen. When you want to do a laboratory experiment on a mouse or a rat, you give valproate and you get autism in those animals. So that's what it's used for. But it happens still. They're still giving valproate to pregnant mothers. Not smart at all. Residual genes from Neanderthals. I think our host is expert on genetics of human beings, but I don't know what his thought is. I put this one in especially for him. It is theoretically possible. I find it difficult to believe that the 2 or 3% of the genes in our bodies, in Homo sapiens bodies, from Neanderthal experiments 40,000 years ago. But people are looking at that. There are deficiencies in one of the things that I did think of doing is using fecal microbiota transplants. Yes, they exist. They're not happy, yeah. But I think it might be able to get good bacteria into where they should be. If you just got some nice bacteria and put them into the rear passage, yes, they'll all be killed and eaten by the other bacteria that I was talking about. So we're looking to that. I'll do that. There's a lot of stuff in the atmosphere. I'm saying it's not just that one product which is causing it. A couple of studies here which show that we've all got glyphosate in our bodies somewhere, and it'll be available. We've got another one that says the same thing. Now, European Union banned glyphosate totally a few years ago, but they changed their mind. The begging from it's corruption as far as I'm concerned. They had another discussion about whether they couldn't come to an agreement between whether they should do it or, and so the people behind desks decided we'll allow it for another 10 years. I think this is disastrous. It kills all insects, therefore birds get killed, worms in the soil get killed, and it's this stuff that's doing it. I think it's scandalous. One condition but I got this quote from a salesman. We don't believe pre-harvest use of glyphosate will be, if it is legally banned, they won't take any notice anyway, is what they're saying. In America, they have an environmental protection agency which was going to rule that glyphosate is dangerous, but the court forced the environmental protection agency to say that it's safe. That's a jolly funny way of dealing with the problem, in my opinion. Corrupt again. They find it in sperms, glyphosate in it, and lots of other things. Goes on and on. I'm not going to even talk about that one. Just to say, it's not the glyphosate causing the disease, but it causes other things to go wrong, so that the disease has got very common. This is where I finish. The purpose of how we have research attached to our units where we do the work. First, we got to identify the autism cause mechanisms in each individual person. People are all different in what they've got inside, triggering the thing. Then we got to devise the most appropriate treatments to minimize each of these different problems, which we're beginning to do, and then persuade the governments to ban use of these products causing such harm to children throughout the world. It's getting worse. It's building up rapidly, the numbers of people with this and other unpleasant diseases which exist. We've started doing this. We produced an assay which will measure perhaps 100 things which we need to know to find out what's in there. That's just one page of it, showing you what we do. We're doing this in collaboration with an American university, and the parent there is a parent with a daughter with autism. And so we just started in the last few weeks of doing these tests, so get through part 1 of the story, seeing what's wrong. And now we've got to work out who needs which cure. That's what we needed. I'm overtime now, I realise that, I'm terribly sorry. Christopher Exley was a colleague of ours in a different university studying the effects of aluminium, and they are hideous and should certainly not be given with each vaccine. And so he had to go. They closed his department down. When they opened up, Keele University opened up a department, a school of medicine. So they had to get rid of these people who were scoundrels in the same way that I am and other people. We think, well, no. Now for something, bit of entertainment. You probably recognise the Orange Man, who will be the President of the United States very shortly. I know he's a strange person, but I remember when he was having been interviewed for the job of the candidate for the Republican Party, and he went on about vaccines and how we shouldn't be using MMR vaccines, dangerous. And he was the only man dressed as an orange with a beaver on his head. All the other candidates were the same, apart from one woman. She was different. But the men all wore the same suits, the same ties. Now I've got, problems with him, but he has vowed that if he does get, when he's president, he's going to look at this again seriously. There's a lot of concern about what vaccines are doing. And this is quite amusing, really. One of his enemies standing for president was Kennedy. He was the nephew of John Kennedy, the former president. He was the son of the other Kennedy that got murdered for his work. And he is a very green, environmentally friendly, conscious man. And he runs a society which does this, and as a magazine. And he's very strong against the COVID manufacture of vaccines and other vaccines. And he was standing against Trump for being president, but then he withdrew at the end because he got about 9,000 votes. Sorry, that's not here. He got very few votes, but Trump was going to appoint him as his head of Department of Health. And this week, he's had 17,000 complaints about having him in that position from physicians, companies that make drugs, and so on. Be interesting to see what he does. Now, I'm finishing now. You can wake up. That's my son. That's how he is now. He's 54. So I've been doing this work for 50 years now. And that's why I keep forgetting things. And that's Jamie. He lives on a farm in Ireland. He's had a lot of difficult problems in his life, but now he's a lovely chap, very friendly, and I'm very proud of him, the way he's come through it and the patience he's shown in many times. And I admire his skill in stealing pints of beer from bars. He's very good at that. Anyway, I think that's it. No, there's one more slide. Yes, that's how I remember that I've come to the end, a picture of this moth. So thank you very much for listening. If you have any problems, ask me. If you've got some ideas about treating autism in any size, shape or form, we want to look at them and see if they are viable that we can use, because we haven't got much at the moment. My email address, I should have put it on there, is straightforward. It's my name in lowercase all the way through, Paul Shuttock at AOL.com. Paul Shuttock at AOL.com. So thank you very much for your patience and living through this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Paul, for your amazing presentation. You have a talk 1 hour and 3 minutes. And I really liked your power and energy on years you have this year. You will turn 80. So it is a good motivation for young researchers in Macedonia and all over the world.
Yes.
I really like your presentation, and also I wrote a lot about all those things you mentioned here in my handbooks and in my articles. I cited your work, Karl Reichart's work in my PhD, but people here don't believe me. They want to hear some foreigners, some people from abroad, you know, that syndrome. So that's why I invited you, and I hope that our parents and colleagues learn a lot from your lecture. We have maximum 47 participants, and I will invite all participants, if they have questions, to leave them in the Q&A session, or to raise their hand and to turn the camera and microphone. Please, just Paul, please stop sharing the presentation. And I will read the first question. Please stop can you stop share the presentation at the up right of your screen?
That's I think. How do I get out? No, that's not it. Let's try.
At the bottom on the upper right. Not this one.
Yeah, I've still got my one here. I'm trying. How do I do that now?
Okay, your granddaughter was gone, so
there we go. Oh, that's supposed to be ending the show.
No ending the show. On the upper right of your screen, there is share button, and you should stop.
I can't. This is where my granddaughter has an essay she has to hand in.
Okay, I do that. Okay, I do that for you. It's okay. First question from Irena Stojanovska. Thank you for your presentation and for sharing your experience, Mr. Šetok.
Yep.
Can autism be considered and treated as a single condition, or do you believe there are multiple forms of autism? If so, what should distinguish these forms? Behavioral characteristics or biomedical characteristics, or both? Do you understand it?
Sorry, I didn't know. No.
Also, you can see in Q&A question. You can see the question. Can autism be considered and treated as a single condition, or do you believe there are multiple forms of autism?
That's it.
That is
it. That is it. Yeah. There is a multiple. I mean, basically, we have now submitted a paper to the British Psychiatrists Club, and they've accepted it, so it should come out soon, saying we're not talking about autism, we're talking about the autisms. There's a lot of differences, and I didn't want to say too much about that. And I think we've got to identify these things, and they'll have different ways of being treated. And if I know you know a lot about different areas of autism, so that was one of the reasons I was particularly keen to have a chat with you about this.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay, thank you. I agree totally with your opinion, and I share your opinion. I hope that our colleague will be satisfied with your answer. The second question is from Madame Anabela Dimoska. She is a mother of a child with autism spectrum disorder. Thank you for your presentation. Does your son live alone or with support? And have you heard about Tomatis method?
Do what? Sorry, you said about my son, and then I didn't catch the last bit. I have hearing things in. I have a problem with hearing. Sorry.
Yeah. Does your son lives alone or with support from institution?
Yeah.
How?
He lives on a farm in Ireland.
Alone or with support?
Yeah, and we in Northern Europe, there was always a custom of a village or a town taking, they're responsible for the people who live there. And so we as parents in Sunderland, we first set up a school for people with autism, a residential school. And then our children grew up and we had to form a sort of community of them. I'm the chairman. We've got 1,000 people on our books. We provide the services, and the local communities social services department pays the fees. We are cheaper than private enterprise people because we live here. We have to pay on our rates to do this, but we've got a lot of people that we're caring for, and they're very lucky. They're very lucky, and we don't. And I look back at what we did when we first started, and I shudder. We had no idea how to do it, but now we've got several hundred between the different units, people living there, and we try and encourage them. We have employment for some of them. We have a computer unit, and some of them work there, and they're extremely good. And it's there. My son has no language. He can speak. Sorry, he can't speak, but he does understand now what's going on, and he's through all the worst stages that children go through, the violence, the depressions. He's through those, and he's living in a community, in a little community on a farm with about 5 other people in the building that he's in. But we want him back. I can't keep going to Ireland. It's too expensive, and my legs aren't too good at the moment. But we want him back here, and that's what we're negotiating with Sunderland with just at this moment.
Okay, thank you. The second part of the question of this mother is: have you heard about Tomatis method?
The what? Sorry.
Tomatis. Have you heard about Tomatis method?
I don't recognize the words.
Yeah. Okay.
If you want, if you want, I can read. So I'm quite happy to do anything on email. Any questions that you have,
yes,
and to discuss it with you. I'm hoping you'll stay with us in this campaign.
Okay. Because there are no other questions, we can close this webinar. We are 77 minutes altogether. I want to say you big thanks for your time, which you share with us, with Macedonian, and also we have from abroad. Some of your colleagues and friends were joining us, and one colleague from Serbia was here, colleague of mine. At this moment we have 48 participants. So this is a good number for Macedonia, which is a country with less than 2 million citizens. And and also I video record this lecture. I will see, with your permission, if the records if it's good, I will upload on the Macedonian Scientific Society for Autism YouTube channel, and probably it will be visible for more people than this, around 50 people. I hope that our common collaboration will continue in the future. And I am grateful for your insights in this presentation and with your answers. Stay healthy and take care of yourself and your family as well. So now I will turn into Macedonian, and you can give us the final words, or you can go out if you like. I want to announce the next webinar, which will be on Macedonian next month.
Okay, I'll do it. But thank you so much for listening. I apologize for my memory. There are certain words I just do not remember, and I had written them down on a piece of paper so that I can do them. But I couldn't find a piece of paper at the requisite time. So, but I'm apologize for that. I'm old. I'll be 80.
It's acceptable. It's acceptable on 8 years. Some people on 8 years are sleeping, watching TV, and they are not working intellectual work. But you're so good and so powerful with your thoughts and with your work, and please continue with your work. Okay, goodbye. And I will ask our people to stay one more minute to announce on Macedonian the next webinar. Почитувани колешки и колеги, драги родители на деца со аутистичен спектар, ви благодарам што присуствувавте на 29-тиот вебинар на МНЗА. Овој пат беше без Аутизам Ресърч Институт, без соработка во моја режија. Јас сум долгогодишен познаник, како што ви кажав, со господинот Пол Шеток. Се надевам дека научивте нешто ново во однос на биомедицинските аспекти. Тоа е горе-долу таа работа ја работам и јас во изминатите 20 веќе, одам кон 26-та година од работата со аутизмот. Јас сега би го најавил малку невообичаен следниот вебинар, бидејќи не се работи за професионалец, не се работи за странец, туку ќе имаме од Македонија, иако сме организирали и вебинари за нашите професионалци од странство, но за следниот месец веќе договоривме, и тука е господјата Анабела Димовска, која што го постави прашањето, мајка на дете со аутистичен спектар, 11 годишно момче. Пред 2 дена го договоривме овој вебинар, најверојатно на 20 февруари во 18 часот, исто на оваа платформа Microsoft Teams. Ќе имате прилика околу 30 минути да чуете презентација за нејзиното искуство со томатис методот. Нејзиниот син веќе оди на третмани во Белгија, во еден реномиран центар, каде што имаат околу 50 години искуство со оваа метода. Претпоставам дека за повеќето од вас е позната, но во Македонија ми се чини дека не се користи на правилен начин, не се добро едуцирани лицата кои што ја користат, младите колеги и колешки. Сепак да чуеме едно белгиско искуство, и можеби уште од утре веќе ќе биде објавен постерот со насловот на презентацијата, со тајмингот, со линкот за пријавување, така што прво пријавете се за да може да го добиете линкот на Microsoft Teams барем еден ден пред самиот вебинар. Значи 20 февруари во 18 часот вебинар со родителка. Сме имале ние родител како и тоа на нашето годишно собрание минатата година. Сме имале, но сега веќе имаме и на вебинар за прв пат родител како Гостин предавач и да го видиме искуството и од она што го чув во разговорот со неа, телефонски разговор, има подобрувања од таа метода и доста од македонските родители кои што таа ги упатила во тој центар имаат подобрување. Се разбира дека методот е скап релативно, скапо е патувањето и престојот во Белгија, но родителите никогаш не ја губат надежта, така да вреди да се проба. Кај некого ќе има ефект, кај некого благ ефект, кај некого никаков ефект, кој сака може да проба. И затоа сме ние тука како Македонско научно здружение за аутизам да ви ги пружиме сите можности, а на вас е како родители да видите дали или како професионалци дали ќе го прифатите во вашата работа тој метод. Моите искуства, теоретски, практички не сум работел, укажуваат дека има одредени подобрувања кај одредена субпопулација на деца со оваа метода, а ќе чуеме повеќе за оваа метода, ете, од господјата Анабела Димовска. Ви благодарам за вашето присуство. Треба да одиме да гледаме ракомет, иако не игра Македонија. Да погледам кој гледа ракомет, кој друго нешто си прави, скоро час и половина. Јас мислам дека е доста. Се гледаме за месец и 4 дена. Ви посакувам пријатна вечер и останете здрави, без грип, без ковид и без останати вирусни, бактериски и други заболувања. Пријатна вечер, се најубаво.
Пријатно.
Пријатно.
Пријатно, пријатно.
Пријатно. Се надобро.